All right, so hey, enough of the list. This really is the list season. That's why Cousin Shane calls it that. But let's kick it over to our interview again with Shawn Smith from Big Blue Country and the Kentucky Daily Podcast. All right, well, we're pleased to once again be joined by Shawn Smith, who is the host of the Kentucky Daily Podcast, the Sources Say show on Kentucky Sports Radio, and of course, the outstanding website, bigbluecountry.com. Give Shawn a follow at GBB Country on the Twitter machine. Shawn, thanks so much for joining me once again. I really appreciate you.
Mike, I always enjoy talking to you. Thanks for having me back on again.
Yeah, and I was joking before we hopped on. Just another reason to like you, man. You're a fellow Green Bay Packer fan, so we suffer these post seasons of expectations equally. You know what?
But yeah, we do. It's been a decade now where I get my hopes up and then an early playoff exit or an NFC Championship exit. But I've been a Packers fan ever since I was 5 years old.
Wow.
And my dad got me a football signed by the entire Green Bay Packers team is like I think the 96 team. And that was the only reason I became a Packers fan. It gave me a reason to kind of follow them. You would think I'd be a Bengals fan growing up in Kentucky. I pulled for them in the Super Bowl, but I've always been a Packers fan ever since that moment.
Yeah, and the last time they won the Super Bowl, what was it, 2010, I think it was. I went up to the opener of the 2011 season to celebrate the championship. And prior to that, it was the day before they were having a big fan rally, and Chad Clifton was there. Of course, he's the only guy I know, Tennessee Vol, that won a national championship, won a Super Bowl. He signed a football, threw it into the crowd, and I was holding a HD camcorder, brand new, but I still jumped and I got that bad boy. So I was willing to sacrifice a camera. That's how much I like Chad Clifton and the Packers. So I'm glad that we share that in common. But moving on from that, of course, another thing we share, the Kentucky Wildcats. You know, you cover them as well as anybody there for BigBlueCountry.com. And before we get to the big news here that just happened, Liam Coen, of course, jumping back to the NFL. I know that's tempered expectations slightly, but before I even ask you about that, this upcoming football season, coming off a 10-win season, a 5-3 SEC record, can you recall a time when Kentucky fans have been anticipating a football season more than they currently are right now?
No, I think in recent years you've had those seasons where they have anticipated a lot of success. I think there was a ton of optimism around this season we just had in Lexington and Liam Coen was a big part of that. That change in the offensive culture, the guys they had returning, a quarterback that everybody had their hopes up for. But
Mhm.
no, I think that this is the one now, especially on the offensive side, because Mike, they have a quarterback that they know going into the season. Well, that's been the biggest question mark of Mark Stoops' tenure has been what are they going to do at quarterback? Do they have a guy there that is talented enough to win them games with his arm? We saw that they have that. Even though Liam Cohen's gone, you still got to feel really good about Will Levis leading the charge offensively. The guys that they brought in at wide receiver, they do have some question marks on that side of the ball, but the buzz is growing for Kentucky to have another big year, and I think the fan base is excited about it. I know basketball is really good right now, but you still see a lot of people talking about football.
Yeah, and I honestly I can't remember a time that's I've seen that from the Kentucky fan base, but it is there. So obviously the elephant in the room, Liam Cohen off to the NFL. Again, I think you make a great point. I think the players matter a whole lot more than coaches in college football. That's why Alabama and Georgia, you always see them at no disrespect to Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. They're outstanding, but their teams are outstanding because they collect all this talent. And Mark Stoops has been able to do that, stacking, the best classes in program history on top of each other. So, how big of a hit do you think this is with Liam Cohen going off to the NFL and particularly with spring football just right around the corner?
Mike, I knew the moment that I talked to Liam Cohen. I had him on Kentucky Daily maybe a couple weeks after he got the UK job. He did a Zoom with UK media. I knew he wasn't going to be in Lexington very long, especially if it was a success. He just had that kind of that pedigree, that mentality, that personality that kind of screamed a future star. And you're seeing it now. But I think the biggest hit is, like you said, so close to spring ball. You hate to have to kind of break in someone new at this point. And I have no idea what direction Mark Stoops is going to go with this hire. I know I keep saying that when they hired Liam Cohen, I don't think any of us had an idea it was Liam until the deal was pretty much done. And it kind of came out on that Sunday, and then they made the hire official. I think they're going to go with someone that is going to kind of keep the same philosophy in place. I think that they've established that. I think Mark Stoops wants to be a heavy ground game with a passing attack that is explosive. You saw that this year with Wan'Dale Robinson. They still leaned on their ground attack, but they wanted to make the big play in the air as well. I think that's the direction they'll go. And I think Stoops, obviously, he's had probably a week to really kind of digest this and start kind of getting his options together, because I think they all knew if Liam was eventually offered, he would take it. So I'm wanting to say Stoops has probably had 4 or 5, 6 days here to kind of sit on it and talk to the rest of his staff and get some targets in mind. And I think it's going to come down to, who does he trust the most? Or does he take some advice from Liam? Is there a guy that Liam wants to point and say, hey, he can kind of do this same thing? You got Scott Woodward there on staff. I think that would be too big of a jump to go from a guy that was a quality control guy a year ago, started mixing in with the wide receivers. That's a huge jump for someone. But if they want to keep it in house, possibly. But I would expect Stoops to probably move quickly with this. I mean, spring ball is just around the corner here.
Any chance now? I think it's just pure speculation, and Kentucky fans having fun. But I got to ask, Dan Mullen, any chance you could see someone like that? Because not that I think that's realistic, but it's almost like Kentucky, because of the calendar right now, you may have to get a guy that was a head coach that was fired with an offensive background, because I don't know how many assistants are going to be willing to leave their program right before spring football.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because it kind of looks like TV is going to be the thing for him until another Power Five takes a shot on him as a head coach. I know he
Right.
did some stuff there with college football playoff. I'm not going to completely rule it out. I mean, that's a guy that is proven in that position. You'd definitely do away with some of the things that they're doing right now. You would have no under center running game if Mullen was the guy, but he's been really good out of the shotgun, especially with quarterbacks running the football. Will Levis, we saw that late in the season, how good he could carry the football and do some things there. I don't think that'll be the direction he'll go, but I think it's intriguing to at least talk about it, because that's a guy that you would think maybe entertain it if he was talked to about it.
And again, it would speak, I think, to Kentucky's program and just how far they've come, that, you're getting I mean, this is such a hypothetical, but, maybe the best Mississippi State coach ever, a guy that's led Florida to multiple 10-win seasons, to come in as an offensive coordinator. That would be a coup, in my opinion. But let me ask you, a more less speculative question here. But to Will Levis, does this hurt his chances at having a big season next year, or is that maybe going a step too far?
I don't think it hurts. I think what he learned under Coen last year, I think he will take into this year as well. You saw Will's confidence continue to grow, especially in November and then in that bowl game. Some of the throws that he made, they started mixing in the run. I think that Will was a guy that just needed to play. He just needed to play and kind of develop. And I think that Liam did an excellent job developing him last year. And I think that Will's going to carry. I would be more concerned, Mike, if Kentucky had a question at quarterback going into this year with a new offensive coordinator. The fact that they have an established quarterback that looked really, really good at times, especially late in the year, that kind of eases some of my concerns about them breaking in a new offensive coordinator. If you didn't have that experienced quarterback, you've got a running back in Chris Rodriguez that you can lean on again, that if he stays healthy is going to be Kentucky's all-time leading rusher if he has the year that he had this past season. You've added some guys at wide receiver, Tavion Robinson, Javon Baker from Alabama. You've got your tight end and Keaton Upshaw that's going to be healthy coming back. Your biggest question mark now is on your tackles. You lost 2. You lost Aaron Kennard. You lost Dare Rosenthal. You lost your center there in Luke Fortner. You have Eli Cox. You have some pieces there on the offensive line that they're going to have to mix in, breaking in a new offensive line coach too as well. The staff turnover has been the biggest thing for the last 3 years. And I think a lot of that, Mike, is because of the success that Kentucky's having as a program. If you've got other places, the NFL, other colleges coming and wanting your staff, you're doing something right. And that's been the case since 2018. Matt House has left. You've had obviously Eric Wolford go to Alabama with Nick Saban. You've had Liam Coen now to the NFL. I mean, you're losing guys, but that's just, to me, that's a product of being very good on the field. And that's a sign of a very good program. And Mark Stoops is having to juggle that now. And I think he'd rather be doing that than not.
Right. Now, do you think is going to step up at receiver with Wan'Dale Robinson off to the NFL. I mean, he was just historically good. It'd be unfair. I'm not asking, if there's going to be another Wandale because that's asking way too much. But one guy that you mentioned that I really think is going to be critical, Tavon Robinson, very productive receiver for Virginia Tech. Maybe him or is it, I know Kentucky signed multiple very touted high school receivers here in recent classes. So, any names you're thinking that will step up at the receiver position for the Wildcats?
I think you got to start with Robinson for sure, given what he accomplished at Virginia Tech. I think he's going to be a guy that from the moment he steps foot on campus, Will Levis will have a relationship with and kind of trying to build what he had with Wandale at that position. Chris Lewis is a guy that they had last year, a freshman that was a highly touted guy from the class before. I think he's got potential. Dickel Crowdis is a guy that missed all of last season that was going to make an impact as a true freshman at that position as well. I think the tight end spot is going to be big for them. You saw Isaiah Cummings have a big year last year at times. I know he had injuries late. He can do some stuff at wide receiver, can play some tight end. Keaton Upshaw coming back. That's a guy that we didn't really talk about last year. That offense would have been even better had they had him. I think he could have led them in touchdown catches, especially in the red zone. That'll be a big target for Will Levis, but he's got some pieces there for sure that he can work with.
Now I don't know, Sean, how much thought and consideration you've put into the upcoming SEC schedules, not only for Kentucky but Kentucky's opponents, but the opening SEC game at Florida, week 2 of the season, and the Gators, they open at home against Utah, which just played in the Rose Bowl. People are touting this Utah up as a top 10 opponent. So let's just say week 1 of the Billy Napier era, I certainly think it's safe to say they're going to be underdogs at home to Utah. I'm not guaranteeing Florida's going to lose that game, but if they do, I think Kentucky is going to be going into Gainesville as a favorite, or at least many, many people are going to be picking Kentucky to win that football game. How wild is it as someone that's followed this program for as long as you have? I mean, for years and years, it was, when you going to beat Florida? When you going to beat Florida? And now we're potentially saying you're going to be favored in Gainesville. Can you believe that the football program's come that far?
No, I honestly cannot. I grew up watching, that series being played, and Kentucky would be competitive, especially when it was in Lexington, and then would lose in heartbreaking fashion late. I think the biggest thing, Mike, was doing it again, right? You did it in 2018. You won in the swamp. And then the next thing became, okay, how do you beat them in Lexington? They let one slip away in 2019. They got embarrassed in 2020 during the COVID year, but then they bounced back last year at home. It was one of the best environments ever at Kroger Field. And the way that Kentucky's played that series since Mark Stoops got in Lexington, I'm not sure there's a program that you face on your SEC schedule that you have a lot more confidence in Kentucky being competitive with than Florida, given the way that it's been played the last 7 to 8 years. That's really going to be an exciting game there early in the SEC schedule. We know if Kentucky wins that game, it usually sets them up to have a big year like it did in 2018 and last year. That seems to be the key ingredient to getting to that 10-win season. It'll be a big one to start SEC play in week 2 for sure for both teams.
Now, I'm hoping you could provide some insight. We got a lot of LSU listeners, and of course, they hired Matt House, a guy that you know very well, was a defensive coordinator there for Mark Stoops a couple of years ago when the last time Kentucky won 10 games in a season. What's LSU getting in Matt House, and how do you grade that hire? You think that's a solid hire by Brian Kelly?
I think it's a very solid hire. I was kind of disappointed when Matt left Kentucky a couple of years ago, especially after the first 10-win season. You thought, okay, Kentucky's going to have some continuity here on staff. I think Matt is a really good guy. He works very hard. Worked his way into that defensive coordinator position at Kentucky. And then you saw Mark Stoops go the route of Brad White. And then Brad White was on staff under Matt. And then he promoted Brad. So very, very good hire. I know Brad White was a guy that was mentioned for that job as well at one point. So that's the thing I keep coming back to, Mike, is a lot of people like what Mark Stoops does at UK and the way that his staff approaches things. And that is, I think, has been the biggest turnaround for Kentucky football. It's been the continuity that they've been able to have together with Vince Marrow staying as long as he's been on staff. You've had Brad White now entering year 5 at Kentucky. Mark Stoops been there now a decade. You're losing key pieces every other year. You're losing a coordinator or an offensive line coach or a secondaries coach. But the kind of the talent pool and the coaching tree there that Mark Stoops has he's able to kind of identify that next guy to come in and keep the thing moving along. But Matt House is a very good, very, very good hire for LSU there, I think.
Hmm. Now, this is the time of year, of course, Kentucky fans are just so involved in basketball, and they got a hell of a team once again. I'm the most casual of casual basketball fans. Like this is the time of the season I start tuning in. So I'm not going to ask for any deep dives or anything like that because I couldn't even name probably 10 SEC basketball players. But I want to ask you, Shawn, as someone that covers that basketball team so well, do you think the Wildcats have what it takes to win the SEC tournament here in a couple weeks?
They do, and then I think they have what it takes to win the one after that. They have all the collective pieces when you put them together to make a serious run at the NCAA tournament. But it's one of those things, Mike, where they have to have every single guy healthy. This isn't a team that's loaded with NBA talent like John Calipari's had in the past. I know Tata Washington is a guy that could be a lottery pick. Oscar Sheboy could be National Player of the Year, and he's not showing up on every draft board. They
Hmm.
have really good college basketball players that have bought into their individual roles, and collectively, I think they're one of 4 or 5 teams that could cut down the nets and win a national championship here in a few months or a few weeks.
And like I said, I'm super casual, so hey, don't hold me against my opinion here. But the games that I have watched, I mean, Auburn looks good, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, of course. Those look like your four contenders. But it certainly looks like it's going to be an entertaining tournament because just based on the little I've seen, it seems like all those teams are capable of hanging with one another. Am I correct in that?
You are correct. I think that SEC tournament in Tampa is going to be a very good 4 or 5 day stretch for the league. I think they're going to dominate TV ratings that week because the league is so good from top to bottom. The teams at the top, you're talking, you have Kentucky and Auburn there in contention for a 1 seed. You have Tennessee, who's in a top 3 or 4 seed in the NCAA tournament as it stands today. You have an LSU team that's capable of winning, Alabama capable of getting hot. The biggest thing for the league on the football side, you have all these big name head coaches.
Hmm.
Basketball made that transition and started getting very good hires. When Rick Barnes moved to the league from Texas, when Bruce Pearl got the job at Auburn, you're seeing the head coaches, the big names come to the SEC, and you're seeing more of a balanced league. It's not just Kentucky's league anymore. You have all these other teams that are there. It's the same thing on the football side. You want to see that balance and that competitiveness across from top to bottom. You're seeing that in basketball as well, and I just think that the league is very, very good. I think it's the best league in college basketball this year.
Will the BBN, are they taking over Tampa? Because I live here in Nashville, and during SEC tournament time, this town turns blue, man. During that tournament, it's always wild to see when those fans come south.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how many people make the trip, but I would fully expect Kentucky to have the biggest crowd there. I know when it was in St. Louis a few years ago, it was the same, but it's never what it is in Nashville. When it's in
Hmm.
Nashville, it's not very far for Kentucky fans. But the biggest difference with this, Mike, is those guys and those fans that go to the SEC tournament, those aren't a lot of season ticket holders. Those are people that save their money and that's their vacation. They literally take the SEC tournament as their vacation week, and then they go and they say, "All right, let's spend 4 days in Nashville, 4 days in Tampa," and then that's what makes Kentucky fans so great and so special. Is a lot of those aren't even your season ticket holders; those are your people that circle that week early in the season and save up money and say, "Hey, we're going to do this for this week for our family. We're going to go down here and take the kids and watch them win an SEC tournament." I think that's what makes it so special.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's awesome. Well, hey, that's all I got for you. I really appreciate you. Shawn Smith, again, the host of the Kentucky Daily Podcast. Got to check out all his work at bigbluecountry.com. And don't forget to give him a follow on Twitter at GBBCountry. Shawn, I really appreciate you for joining me once again.
Anytime, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, so just want to say thanks again, Shawn, for joining the program. I hope I didn't come across as quite the fool here asking a couple basketball questions, but hey, it's just that time of year, and who knows, I may even get Cousin Shane to break down a game or two here in basketball. I'm thinking more about the SEC tournament. We'll have an eye on that to be sure. But I'm out of my depth when I'm talking basketball. So